Today we are doing a deep dive into the Sigma Cool Neutrals palette that is launching in 2 days on May 2nd. I posted a video about 2 weeks ago where I did 3 different eye looks with this palette and I kind of gave you guys my first impressions. But today we're going to go into an overhead view. I'm going to swatch out this palette, kind of talk about all of the shades. And then I did some swatch comparisons to other existing Sigma palettes and also some palettes that you guys requested to see compared to this one. I also did a 4th look with this palette, which is the look that I'm wearing today. So if you want to jump around the video, I will leave timestamps down below for you. And then at the end of the video, I give you my very final thoughts on whether or not I would purchase this palette. I really wanted to make this video so you guys can make a more informed decision on whether or not you need this new palette in your life. Friendly reminder that whenever you're shopping on Sigma's website, you can use my code AngelaBright to save some money. Today is the last day to use my code to get up to 40% off site-wide, and then after that, it jumps back to its normal 10%, I believe. But let's dive in and start with swatches. As promised, today I'm gonna go through and swatch the Sigma Cool Neutrals palette, and I'm also going to be swatching and comparing it to a bunch of other palettes. I pulled out some of my other Sigma palettes for comparisons, and there were also some other palettes that you guys wanted to see this palette compared to as well. Again, if you want to see 3 looks and my first impression with this palette, I'll link that video down below for you. And after filming that video and reading all of your guys' comments, a lot of people were like, this palette looks like it is half warm toned and half cool toned, and I agree with that. So I'm gonna swatch this palette out, but I'm gonna swatch it where I have all the warmer tones together and then all the cooler tones together. I'm gonna start with these 2 matte shades up here. This is Superior. This is Fossil. And then I'm gonna swatch Burst. Then we have Burst. This is Brazil. This is Harvest. These are swatching out really, really nicely. This actually is my first time swatching out this palette. So these are the shades that I think lean more on the warm side of this palette. They're not super warm, like they're not very orangey, but this mustard shade does have a yellowiness to it that makes it warm. This Fossil shade, this one's kind of tricky. I feel like it looks a tad bit red in the pan, but swatched out, it's very muted. And then of course we have this yellowy gold, we have kind of a bronzy copper, and then for this brown shade, I think I would call this one more like neutral warm. I'm gonna add in that shimmery shade Laguna. This one I feel like leans a little bit more mauve. And then I'm gonna go back here to Volcanic. Now I would say that that is a cool toned deep brown. Next I'm going to swatch Polished. Now I loved this shade when I put it on my eyes in my first look with this palette. And this one is kind of more of a topper shade. It doesn't have a lot of like a base pigment to it, but the sparkle on that is really, really pretty. And I would say this shade leans more on the neutral side as well. So far I've swatched out those 8 shades of the palette. Now let's do these final 6, and these 6 do lean more on the cool tone side. So we have Talisman, and this one's kind of like a grayish purple. And then we have Iris, and this shade is really, really pretty. It's kind of like a silver that has a touch of lavender in it. It's actually really gorgeous. Next we have Thunder, and I don't know, this shade has a little bit of blue in it. I'm also seeing gray, and it kind of has like a really dark base to it. I'm gonna swatch Angel Wings next to that one. I actually don't think I used this shade in my first video, but very pretty color. It's kind of different. Again, I think this one leans more neutral. And we have the last 2 dark shades. So we have Onyx. And this shade is a black, but it's not like the blackest black. It does kind of have just like a drop of gray to it. And the last shade is Condor. Now I wanted to swatch these 2 next to each other just to kind of see how they compare. And I'm on my bicep right now. And this shade is pretty dark. It does have a hint of purple to it. Okay, see if I can show you my whole arm here at some kind of angle. There we go. All right, so there is the entire palette swatched out for you in kind of a way that makes sense to me, where we have more of the warm tones on this side and then more of the cooler, more neutral tones down here. Kind of as I said in the first video, the shades in this palette do lean pretty deep. You know, we have 4 deep shades right here where I feel like there's not a lot of light to mid-tone shades that would be good as like a transition shade on my light skin tone. And that is totally fine. We do need variety on the market, but like those are shades that I am missing to make this a complete palette for myself. I think if you're someone that likes to do softer eyeshadow looks, that this palette might not be for you, but I think if you have more of a medium to deep skin tone and these colors are calling to you, I think you would like it. Now I want to go through my other Sigma palettes and we'll do some comparisons here because I did find some similarities. So these are the Sigma palettes that I want to do some quick comparisons to. I will do some swatches, but I'm not going to swatch out all of the palettes side by side, but if there are any similar shades, I will do that. First palette I wanted to pull out is the Sigma Ambiance. Now this is Sigma's warmest palette that they have. And one thing I said in my video where I did more of a warm tone look with this palette, I think I used like these 4 shades right here, is that I said that it looks like that look could be pulled from the Ambiance palette. Just kind of looking at these, I am seeing a couple similarities, mostly with these 2 mustard shades, these 2 kind of more warmer tones. You have your deep brown shades. Let's do some swatches. I want to start with the mustard. So we're going to do a Superior, and Cool Neutrals will be on the left side of my arm. And I want to swatch Basque next to that one. Those are pretty close. I feel like Basque has a tiny bit more orange in it, but those are pretty dang close, guys. Next, I want to do these kind of more reddish tones. I'm assuming that one's going to be more warm toned, but I just have to see, you know? So this is Fossil. I'm going to swatch Summer Solstice next to that. Oh yeah. Yeah, like I expected, there's definitely more warmth to Summer Solstice, whereas Fossil is just kind of like a muted kind of mauve-y color. It's really hard to explain this kind of shade. Let's swatch these brown shades out. So we're gonna do Volcanic, and I'm gonna swatch Enrich next to that. Okay, so I am seeing a bit more warmth in that Enrich shade. I want to swatch these 2 kind of more yellow goldish shades. So starting with Burst. This yellow gold does have just like a hint of green in it, which I kind of like. And then we're going to swatch Sunflower next to that. Big difference there. This one just has so much more warmth and like oranginess to it. Next, I want to swatch out Brazil. It's kind of hard to tell in the pans, but I feel like one of these shades might be kind of similar, and we have to see, you know? So I'm going to swatch out Firefly. Okay, the tone is actually very similar on those. Let's try Luster. It's gonna go right below. So that one compared to Brazil, Luster does have a little bit of peachiness to it. Let me just try Midas, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be pretty coppery. Yeah, more kind of yellowy orange, but a copper in there. Okay, after swatching these out, they're actually not as similar as I thought they would be just looking at the 2 palettes. Similar looking shades in Cool Neutrals just definitely leans more on the muted looking side, whereas there is a lot of warmth in the shades from Ambiance. The next Sigma palette I wanted to look at is Cinderella, and I wanted to pull out this one for the shimmery shades. So looking at these 2 palettes, I was looking at some of the shimmery shades. So I was looking at Laguna, Iris, and Thunder, and I want to see how they look next to Fantasy, One of a Kind. Ooh, and maybe these 2 gold shades. So I'm gonna start with Laguna from Cool Neutrals. The sparkle in the shade is so pretty. And I'm gonna swatch Fantasy next to that one. Oh, I don't know about you guys, but that looks like the same shade to me. Maybe a tiny bit more depth in Fantasy, but like the sparkle is exactly the same. Next is Iris, and I wanna swatch One of a Kind next to that. Okay, they're not exact, but I feel like, again, they're very similar. I'm almost kind of seeing a little bit of a teal base in One of a Kind, where Iris is definitely just like a really light kind of silver lavender shimmer. Sometimes it's hard to tell how it's translating on camera, but in person, they look pretty close. Okay, I don't think these are gonna be close, but I do want to swatch Thunder and Bippity Boppity Boo. I just love saying that. And Thunder is a nice deep shade, a bit of blue in there. Bippity Boppity Boo it's just like a deep kind of bluish purple sparkle. Remember how I was saying that Onyx is like a black, but it's not like your blackest black? You can kind of see there, Mischievous compared to Onyx, like you can just see how much of a true black this shade is, whereas this one has a bit of gray in it. Okay, I kind of want to swatch Burst and Charming, but I already know they're gonna look pretty different. Should I do it anyways? Might as well, right? I'm here. I'm doing this for you guys. So again, we have Burst. And this one's just gonna have a lot of yellow in it. Charming. I can already tell you without swatching, you might be looking at Cinders and Fossil, but again, Fossil is just such a muted shade where Cinders does have a lot of warmth in it, so they're not gonna be very similar. Okay, but it's kind of interesting comparing those shimmers, right? So just wanted to point out, maybe if you were super drawn to some of these shimmers and Cool Neutrals, but you already have Cinderella, I feel like they're kind of similar. The next palette I want to pull out is the Alice in Wonderland. The similar shades that I kind of see right off the bat are the mustardy shades right here. It looks like Fossil and 10 over 6 look kind of similar as well. I want to see these two shimmers together. I think Tea Party is more green, but they might have a similar vibe. These two brown shades also look kind of close, so let's swatch these out. So again, I'm going to start with the mustard shade and then swatching Twinning next to that. Okay, I would definitely call these both mustardy shades, but they are different. Twinning does have a lot more yellow in it, whereas Superior has more brown to it. Next, I'm going to swatch Fossil, and I'm going to swatch 10 over 6 next to that one. Oh, they're kind of close. I feel like the tone of these two shades is really similar. Fossil's maybe just a little bit deeper. Next, I'm going to swatch out these two browns, starting with Condor from Cool Neutrals, and then Curiouser from Alice. Okay. It almost looks like the shades on Cool Neutrals is just kind of like a slightly deeper version of the shades from Alice. Let's do these kind of yellowy green shimmers. And then Tea Party. I love the shade from this palette. I'm getting somewhat of a similar vibe, but Tea Party definitely has more green in it, and this shade is more of like a topper shade where Burst is kind of like your typical pigmented shimmer. Okay, and then trying to see if there's any other shades that look somewhat similar to me. I kind of want to swatch these two deeper blue shades together. I don't think they'll be super similar, but I just gotta see. So this is Thunder, Lost. Ooh, this shade is so gorgeous. I don't think I've used this shade enough. Okay, so both deep blues, but Lost is definitely more of like a true deep navy blue, where Thunder does have a bit of gray in it. So there definitely are some similarities between these 5 shades from the palettes, but I think the biggest difference are some of these bright colors that you also get in the Alice in Wonderland palette. Oh, what about my Iris shade? I need to do that. And I think I'm gonna swatch White Rabbit next to that. And this one looks more silvery, yep. Kind of like a white silver where Iris is more of like a lavender silver. Just kind of want to see how Alice looks next to that, but this one is more blue, right? Yeah, it's pretty sheer as well. All right, so there are those two palettes, similar shades side by side. Next, I want to pull out 2 of their 9pan palettes. Now, these are probably my top 2 out of all their 9pan palettes, which is kind of funny. Now, what I immediately saw was like these 4 shades right here are giving me like those 4 shades right there. So I gotta swatch these out. I'm gonna start with just the Ritzy palette. So first I wanna start with Polished. Again, this kind of gorgeous, just shimmery topper shade. And I need to swatch Gold Rush next to that. Oh my gosh. Okay, shade-wise, they're very, very close, but formula-wise, they are different. Again, where Polished is more of that kind of just topper shade, where Gold Rush has more of a base to it for that shimmer, but like the tone of the shade, very, very similar. Next is Superior, and of course, swatching Hazel next to that. Go over that Superior one again. I feel like that just swatched a little bit weird. Okay, those are pretty dang close again. I do feel like the Hazel one just swatched a bit better. I feel like I am seeing a slight difference between the 2 shades, but it's kind of hard for me to pinpoint exactly what I'm seeing. But the vibes are so similar. Next, I'm gonna swatch Volcanic, and I'm gonna put Enrich next to that. Okay, there is a little bit more warmth to Enrich. I kind of want to swatch Midas and Brazil next to each other. I don't think they'll be super similar, but I think they'll kind of serve a similar purpose within the palettes. Like, I would use these for the same kind of shimmery shade on my eyelid, but Midas just has, I don't know, more copper kind of bronziness to it. It's a little bit brighter as well. There's no similar shades for Gossamer, Nectar, or Brownstone, or Silk, but I feel like Nocturnal might be pretty close to Onyx. Starting with Onyx, and then Nocturnal. So in this pan, this shade does have a bit of sparkle in it, but I find that it doesn't really show up on the eyes that much. So it kind of acts as more as just a matte shade. Very similar, but Nocturnal is a bit deeper. I would definitely say out of these 5 shades, they are a pretty decent match. For me personally, I love this color story. Like I said, I really like Ritzy. It's one of my favorite out of their 9pan palettes. But what I love about this one is that for me, this is a complete color story because I also have my highlight shade, I have a light transition shade, and I have even like a super light, almost white shade to help blend out any edges of colors. So for me, I kind of view this as a complete palette where I could get a bunch of different looks from it because of the different range of light, medium, deep shades. As I said earlier, the Cool Neutrals palette does lean just more medium to deep in general. So honestly, if you were into these shades, I would definitely go with the Ritzy palette over Cool Neutrals. And it's cheaper as well, which is just a plus. Then let's go back to earthy here. I'm just gonna keep going down my arm, hope you don't mind. Okay, so again, we have those mustardy shades. We have Superior and Sunbaked. I don't know why it feels like these mustard shades are just kind of popping up in Sigma's palettes. And Sunbaked next to that. I also wanted to keep the Ritzy palette on my arm because there are kind of some similar vibes between earthy and Ritzy as well. So with those two kind of mustardy shades, I think again Superior leans more brown. There's a little bit more oranginess in Sunbaked. I want to see these two brown shades together. I don't think they'll be super close, but we have Harvest from Cool Neutrals with Fawns from Earthy. Yeah, I think in this case, Harvest does lean a little bit more cool toned compared to Fawns. Nothing for Harmony, Will-O-Wisp. I do want to see Brazil and Canyon next to each other. Again, Canyon has more warmth to it, and that one actually swatched very similarly to the Moss shade from Ritzy. And then I want to see these two deeper brown shades next to each other. So again, going in with Condor next to Shadowy. Actually, those two do look pretty similar. Again, there's a slight difference. It's just hard for me to pinpoint exactly what it is, but very, very close. After swatching these out, I feel like I'm just kind of seeing how close Earthy and Ritzy really are. Earthy just kind of has like a pop of green, but other than that, they're kind of similar, honestly. I definitely see some similarities here, but again, out of these three palettes, I would choose Ritzy. If I had to buy one, it would be this one. Okay, so I have a couple more Sigma palettes that I'm mostly just gonna lay side by side next to Cool Neutrals so you can really see the differences, but probably no swatches. We have Sigma Corte Rosa, two very different palettes here. Corte Rosa is just bright and springy. Honestly, this like makes me want to use it now because it's like a spring and sunny outside. We have New Mod. I really like New Mod because again, for me, this is like a full palette that I can create a bunch of different looks with because of the different ranges of tones. And this palette does lean a little bit more on the mauve-y side. Next is Beauty and the Beast. I love the Beauty and the Beast palette mostly for like these 6 neutral shades right here. These are like perfect neutrals in my opinion. Then you have some fun pops of color with the pink and the reddish tones. But again, two very different color stories. And then for shits and giggles, I just had to pull out my palette. You know, I'm going to talk about my palette whenever I can. And the shades in my palette are definitely just brighter in general. Like I've been saying, the shades in Cool Neutrals are more on the muted side. So again, no big similarities here. I did pull out the Blueberry Parfait quad. If I'm covering up this side of the palette, I feel like I'm getting similar vibes here, right? Mostly with this blue shade right here. So let's swatch those out because I want to see how similar these are. All right, this is Thunder, then Chilled. Oh my gosh, those look so freaking close. Wow. I don't think they'll be super close, but I want to see Harvest and Granola next to each other. We got Harvest and Granola. Now this is a super, super light shade. Yeah, not that similar. But I want to see these two deep shades next to each other. So starting with Onyx next to Blueberry. I'm gonna go over that one more time. Okay, those are pretty close, but I feel like Blueberry just has like a drop more blue in it. And then clearly this quad does have like a light highlighter shade that Cool Neutrals does not have. But if you were really into these two shades, Blueberry Parfait would be the way to go. And then just for funsies, I wanted to grab the Tiramisu quad because in my opinion, this is like the most cool tone thing Sigma has done, and it's in a tiny quad. If Sigma was gonna name a palette Cool Neutrals, I would have loved to see like this quad, but just expanded. You know what I mean? Because to me, these are nice, cool tone shades. Like, again, I just feel like this half of the palette does not belong in a palette that's called Cool Neutrals. If the palette was named something else, then sure. But because you have the name Cool in the palette, I'm expecting cool tones. All right, so those are all of the Sigma palettes that I wanted to compare to Cool Neutrals. Now I wanted to show you a couple palettes that you guys specifically asked to see compared to this palette. First, we have the Makeup by Mario Master Mattes, the Neutrals palette. This is the newest one that just launched. There's a side-by-side comparison. Again, the Master Mattes palette is clearly all matte shadows. And it's just funny because this palette is called the Neutrals palette, but I feel like there are shades in here that are more cool toned than the Cool Neutrals palette. For example, the these kind of 4 shades right here are cool tone shadows. I'm not going to swatch these two out because there's really not many similarities, but I know you guys wanted to see these two side by side. Next is Natasha Denona, I Need a Nude. I feel like this palette has become a staple for a lot of people now. Again, I think in I Need a Nude, we're seeing shades that lean more on the cool tone, kind of taupey side. At first, I wasn't going to swatch any shades out, but I feel like I'm seeing a few similarities that I want to see side by side. Okay, I'm going to start with Polished. After swatching this shade out a million times, I feel like this is probably my favorite one in the Cool Neutrals palette. And I want to swatch Delilah next to that because this is one of Natasha's like the sparkling wet effect shadows, which is kind of what Sigma's doing here with this kind of formula. So I think sparkle wise, they're kind of similar, but the base shade underneath is different. I don't know, I feel like I'm seeing a little bit more pink in Delilah and just kind of more brown and Polished. I also want to see Fossil and Vague next to each other. All right, so this is Fossil and Vague. Okay, I feel like those are kind of similar. I feel like Vague is just a little bit brighter, a little bit more like saturated, I guess, because again, I keep saying Fossil is just like a muted shade. And then I kind of wanted to see Angel Wing and Travertine next to each other. Okay, there's Angel Wing and Travertine. Okay, they definitely are different, but again, I feel like they would kind of serve the same purpose for an eye look. I do think that Angel Wing is a little bit more neutral, where Travertine does have almost a tiny bit of warmth in there. Let's swatch the deep brown shades just to see. So we have Volcanic. That was very sloppy. Next to Silhouette. Swatches are getting sloppier and sloppier, I'm so sorry. This shade always swatches out so terribly for me, but I swear it does not look that bad on the eyes. Okay, pretty dang close there too. Again, I'm just seeing a very subtle difference. I actually like this little color story though. I wouldn't have thought to put those shades together because they're just like so far apart on the palette, but they're actually really pretty together. Okay, so there is Cool Neutrals next to I Need a Nude. I had someone ask to see it next to Patrick Ta Major Dimension 3, which is like one of my favorite palettes at the moment. Definitely not similar at all, but it takes me 2 seconds to show you this. With Major Dimensions 3, this bottom row is mostly cool toned, this top row is more warm toned. I really think the only similar shade might be these two deep browns, but that is pretty much it. You might look at Fossil, but again, the shade is very muted, and these shades up here are very, very warm. I also had a couple people that wanted to see it next to Stone Cold Fox. I don't know how my palette got this dirty, but I've been swatching it a lot. When someone mentioned Stone Cold Fox, I did not think that these two palettes would be similar, and I don't really think they are either. Stone Cold Fox definitely leans more on the cool neutral side. We even have some like soft kind of pinky rosy tones in here. You have a couple more gray tone shades, which are shades that I would have liked to see in cool neutrals, but I don't think they're similar at all. I think you're getting two completely different palettes here. Now I have one more palette to show you guys that just happens to be in my collection now because I got it during the Creators and Friends trip, and that is the Fantasy Cosmetica Fighter palette. Now I've only used this palette once and I only used 2 shades from it, so I can't really speak much on the palette, but I was looking at these two side by side and I was like, oh, I can see a couple similarities here. Because the Fighter palette does have a little bit of warmth in here. You have another mustard, a kind of reddish tone, a little bit more coppery, but then you also have some cool tone shades in here with these ones right there. So let's do a couple swatches. You guys already know I'm gonna start with the mustard shade. We have Superior, and I'm gonna swatch that next to Valor. Definitely a difference there. Superior has more brown in it. Valor just leans a little bit more yellowy. Let's do these kind of more mid-tone browns. So this is Harvest. And then I'm gonna swatch Marshall next to that. Marshall's definitely deeper than Harvest, but same kind of tone overall. Keep looking at Iris next to either Blade or Glory. I don't think they'll be super similar, but let's find out. Okay, so there's Iris. I haven't swatched these shades out yet, so I don't really know what they look like. Okay, this is Blade. Okay, that is gorgeous though. Definitely has a lot more blue in it. Kind of reminds me of that shade from, I think, Cinderella is what I'm thinking of. And let's see Glory. I don't know what this one looks like, but it looks really pretty. Ugh, that's a beautiful color. Yeah, definitely not similar to Iris. Again, Iris is like a silver lavender. This one, I don't even know how to explain that. I'm seeing like bright purple in there, but it is more of like a sheer base to it. And then these two shades right here are very warm toned. I don't think they'll be close to Fossil at all. I think the last similar shade I'm seeing are just the two deeper kind of grayish blacks in here. Oops, I'm doing this in the wrong order. Okay, we're gonna put Warrior over here. Onyx right next to that. Or do you think Condor might be closer? Let me try Condor over here. I don't know, I don't feel like either of these two deeper shades are super close to Warrior. Yeah, I don't think these palettes are as similar as they may look. There definitely are some differences there. Whew, okay, that was so many swatches, but I really hope that was helpful for you to see the palette compared to other ones, especially other Sigma palettes. I just really want to help you guys make a good informed decision on whether or not you want or need this palette in your collection. All right, we have finished the swatches, and now let's do one more eye look with this palette. All right, let's get started on an eye look with this palette. Again, I've already done 3 looks with this palette, so if you want some more inspiration, I'll link that video down below for you. And I want to try to make this a softer look if possible. So I'm going to start with Fossil on a Sigma E25, and I'm actually going to dust this shade all over my lid. So I'm using the flat side of the brush to lightly pack on this shadow. So I'm starting by packing the shadow on my lid, and then once there's less product on my brush, I'll kind of start to blend that shade upwards towards my crease. So I'm using this shade as kind of the base for that Laguna shade, because I will put that one on top. And I really just want a soft wash of this color. Like, I'm not going to build it up too much. I don't want it to be too intense. Now I'm taking more Fossil on the tip of this brush, and I'm going to run that across my entire lower lash line. I pretty much have this Fossil shade wrapped around my entire eye from my lower lash line up towards my crease and then lightly on my lid. Now, like I said earlier about this palette does have mostly medium to deep tones, so I personally need some kind of lighter shade to help soften the edges. My go-to shade for that is Bare from my eyeshadow palette. So I'm just taking some Bare on the same brush, and I'm going to use that around the edges of Fossil. I feel like this eye look is looking a tad bit sickly on me, but like I said, I'm gonna add something on top of this. So I'm gonna take Laguna on my finger, and there's what it looks like, and I think this will add some more depth. And I want this on my entire eyelid, because I love the sparkle in this shade. And then going back to the brush I was using, I'm going to blend around the edges of Laguna. Now I'm going to go in with a little bit more Fossil, kind of right here on my outer crease area. Now I do want to add just a little bit of depth to my lower lash line to kind of even everything out, since my lid is currently deeper than my lower lash line. So I'm going to take a little bit of Talisman on a pencil brush, and I'm going to go along the outer part of my lower lash line. Now I want to add a highlight shade, so I'm going to take Bright from my palette, popping that in the inner corner. Then a little bit under the brow. I'm going to add a brown liner to my waterline. This is Urban Decay Mushroom. I went ahead and finished up this look with some mascara and lashes, and for my lashes I'm wearing the Bright Lashes Half Lash in Flutter. And here's the final close-up of this eye look. I finished up my makeup, and here is how the final look turned out. I'm not trying to shit on Sigma right now, but I just need to be straight up with you guys. For my personal taste and the types of shadows that I like to wear now, this palette is not for me. I'm having a hard time pinpointing exactly what it is about this palette. And I think there's a couple things that I just don't really love about it. I personally don't like how this palette is half and half, how you have kind of half warm neutrals and then half deep, cool-ish tones. For me, there's just way too much depth in this palette. Like I said earlier, you got 4 super deep shades right here that I would use to deepen up a look, but I don't need 4 shades like that. I think overall, this palette just leans too deep for me, and right now, I just like to wear softer eyeshadow looks, and I feel like you can't really get a soft look out of this palette. The color story feels a little bit jumbled up to me. It's just kind of a big mixture, and it's not making a lot of sense in my eyes. So yes, this palette does launch in 2 days, and I know a lot of you are very excited about that, and I'm so happy for you. If you love this color story, yay, I'm so happy that you guys like it, but this is just not for me. Friendly reminder though that today is the last day of Sigma's anniversary sale where you can get up to 40% off site-wide with my code AngelaBright. This palette has not launched on the day that this video is going up. This palette is launching on May 2nd. But if you want to pick up any brushes for 40% off, my palette is also 40% off. I will link those down below for you. So I know this video was a little bit all over the place, but I hope that it helped you decide on whether or not you want to pick up the new Cool Neutrals palette. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.